Hi, welcome to another episode of the Mr. Forrest Ministries podcast, reaching kids in the home and in the church with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Before we go into this episode, I would like to introduce my two daughters. First, this is Sarah, but nobody calls her Sarah. We all call her Baby C. Oops. That's the one I meant to do. And this is my daughter Maggie, and I call her the Goose, and I'm the only one that's allowed to call her the Goose.
Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, for of such is the kingdom of God."
We are the Chapman family, missionaries to kids, partnering with churches to reach their communities for Christ.
In this podcast, we want to share with you biblical principles for reaching and discipling kids.
Whether you are a parent, a pastor, or a children's ministry volunteer, our goal is to inspire and equip you with philosophical and practical tools to show children the fullness of the gospel.
Come join us on this epic adventure.
So thanks for joining us. Let's recap real fast. So in our first episode, we introduced the concept that kids are the church. Kids own the kingdom. The kingdom of God belongs to kids, is what Jesus said. And then in the second episode last time, we talked about, so since we developed the theological concept that kids are the church, we asked the question, well, how do we do church? And we opened our Bibles to Acts 2:42. Acts 2:42 says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers." And last week we talked about continuing in the apostles' teaching. So we talked about apostolic preaching and teaching of the word, expository preaching for kids and what that looks like. Now, if you didn't hear episodes 1 or 2 and 2 yet, I would encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2 before we jump into this one. This week we want to talk about that second point. So how did they do church? How did the early church do church? After Jesus died and rose again, he showed himself alive, he ascended into heaven, he sent the Spirit, the church was birthed, all these people were there from around the world, celebrating the Passover. Well, what do we, celebrating Pentecost, and they're like, well, what do we do now? They did Acts 2:42. So let's talk about that for this episode, the fellowship. Now, what does that look like for kids? So first, that word, the fellowship, the Greek word's koinonia, and it doesn't mean like, we use the word fellowship like, kind of casually, right? We're going to talk for a couple minutes. That's us fellowshipping, or we're going to fellowship, stay right after church and fellowship. And that's a part of it. But the word is more, this is how I teach kids. I do this with my fingers here, like two chains connecting. It's the interconnectedness of your life, connecting your lives together, sharing your lives together. Now, girls, how do adults share their lives?
Well, Mom's been gone since 9:30 this morning, and it is now, I don't have a watch, it's afternoon, so she's sharing her life right now by drinking coffee with a friend, and she has not come back.
They went out to breakfast. And I have a feeling that they stayed there, and then they ordered lunch, because right now, see, it is 2:53. It's basically 3 o'clock, 3 p.m., and they started at like 9 or something.
Yeah.
So that's how adults fellowship. They'll sit down at a meal together. What else? What else do adults do to share their lives?
Talking.
Well, they do. I mean, that's what my wife's doing right now. How about this? Like, a guy brought this up at one of the seminars I was doing. I'm not like an outdoorsy type of person, but this guy was like, well, fishing. Well, yeah, guys go out and they fish together, and women do it too, and people go out and they go hunting. So what are some ways that teenagers share their lives?
Roller skating.
I was thinking of that one. Totally. When I was a young teenager, man, roller skating was like the thing to do. You go to the skating rink. You go to the arcade. What else?
Shopping.
Shopping. Man, they used to do that a lot. So they used to go to the outlets, and Joel would buy another jacket. We knew if Joel was going to the outlets that he was going to come back with another jacket. The guy has like 27 jackets, God bless him. And
for each season.
For each season, and he's always looking for more. So people of different age levels share their lives differently. But this was transformational in my thinking. When I understood that kids share their lives by
Playing.
playing, it revolutionized my thinking. Because when kids, okay, so think back to when you were kids. Okay, so before I was the kids pastor and when you were kids, what did your Sunday school, by the way, we'll talk about this in an episode, but I don't like the name Sunday school. What did your Sunday school classes look like? Like when you walked in, now what? What did the teacher tell you to do when you walked in?
Have a seat.
You come in, you sit down. Then what?
Sometimes we'd memorize a verse on the board, or we would color pages and
Do activities.
So they sit down, they color, they memorize a verse, and there's like teaching, and it's kind of sit up and behave, right? And listen, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But if we're going to do church the way that the early church did church, which I think is the biblical pattern for doing church, what must kids do other than receive the apostolic teaching and preaching? What else do they need?
fellowship, share their lives.
They need to share their lives. Now, it's harder for kids than for adults and teens because some teens have their driver's license and they could just come pick you up and then go hang out. Adults can just drive like my wife did. She just took the minivan and she just went. But kids can't necessarily do that. So facilitating an opportunity during a Sunday school class or a church service for kids to share their lives is them being the church. And the way that kids share their lives is they
Play.
play. Now, we were at a church last weekend in New Jersey doing a laser tag outreach event, and Timmy had not seen one of his buddies there since maybe, was Jermaine at camp winter weekend?
Yeah,
So it had been a couple months.
It's in summer camp.
Oh, summer camp. So he hadn't seen him since August. Timmy gets out of the van, and within seconds, what were Jermaine and Timmy doing?
Play.
They just ran away and started playing, and they were like nowhere to be found, and we're like unloading and doing the grunt work, and they're just like zoom, off they go, and they're just like they're jumping on the trampoline, and they're playing hide and seek in the building, and they're doing all this stuff because that's how kids share their lives. They share their lives by playing. And when that dawned on me, it transformed the way that I did kids ministry. So even before I was a kids pastor, I had taught the 5th and 6th grade, my wife and I taught the 5th and 6th grade gospel story hour class. We didn't call, as soon as I was able to, I changed the name from Sunday school. I'll just tell you why real quick, and we'll deal with this in a future episode, because who wants to go to school on Sunday? Like, you invite your friends, hey, you want to go to Sunday school with me? No, I hate school. They don't want to go. So, but we taught a class, and we were like, man, the kids just come in and they sit down, and it's like, we gotta beat this up. What are we gonna do? And then we realized that kids fellowship through playing. And you guys were young when this started dawning on me, and I started realizing we need to facilitate fellowship. We called it fellowship playtime. And girls, let's talk about your childhood. What were some of the things that you remember us starting to implement that allowed kids to play together and share their lives together?
We started collecting games like foosball and carpet ball, and then we got a gaga pit.
So a man in our church built us a carpet ball table. Carpet ball's a really fun game that uses like pool balls, and you like roll it down this thing and try to knock the opposing player's pool balls like into this little pit. Foosball, we went in kind of halvesies with the youth pastor. There was a gaming table company that was like had a sale if you buy two, so we went in halvesies and got those. Somebody built us a gaga pit. But even before that, think before we started getting like, I don't know, fancy or whatever, what were some of the things that we did like earlier on?
Dizzy baseball or whatever.
Yes, okay. So we would play dizzy kickball where like the person, once the ball is pitched, they had to spin around once. or twice or 3 times or 4 times before they kicked the ball, and then watching them trying to run around the bases was really fun. We actually inherited a really big space that we turned into the kids ministry center, so we started developing these wild games. We just had these little rubber bases we'd put around, and then another one is, do you guys remember sock ball?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what we did. We took a sock, we rolled it up, we stuffed it in a sock. So it was a sock in a sock, and that was the bat. And then we pitched a rolled up sock, that was the ball. And it was like baseball, but with a sock. And we started coming up with all these weird, and you know, as we played together, our lives started doing this. And we went from being just another Sunday school class to being a family that always wanted to be together. Another thing that we started doing was we started opening the Wednesday night doors 30 minutes early. So it started at 7. We say, kids, come at 6:30. And we called it Fellowship Playtime. And what else did we gather? So we had carpet ball, we had foosball, we had Gaga pit. What else?
We had giant checkers.
Giant checkers.
Checkers and tic-tac-toe.
You can get giant checkers at like, what's it called? Cracker Barrel. And we had giant tic-tac-toe. You can get those it's like, what does they call it? Connect 4. You can get those on Amazon. What else did we?
We taped a Foursquare on the floor.
We taped Foursquare on the floor, and we have Foursquare. Man, that was like the hub of social activity for kids. The Foursquare pit. Man, everybody hung out there. We invented just a ridiculous game called foot tag, and it's just ridiculous. You just with your foot, you tag someone else, and it was all the time. Sort of like in professional wrestling. There's the 24/7 title where like someone could jump you at a restaurant, pin you at the restaurant, and you'd win that title. Well, we had this ongoing game of foot tag where at any moment someone could tag you, and you with your foot you tag them and you say tag, no tag backs. Now they have to find someone else to tag, and it became like legendary foot tag. We were at a church in Lancaster, PA, 3 weeks ago, and I walk up to a girl and I said, tag, no tag backs. Now she was at summer camp and immediately she remembered, like from August, she remembered and she ran and she tagged somebody else. It's like this ongoing, never ending game of foot tag. And as we were facilitating these times for us to play together, everybody's lives started doing this. We weren't just some random class of random kids that came in, sat down, listened, and then left. We became a family. The most important thing you can do with those kids is play with those kids. When an adult or a teenager plays with kids, you are communicating, you are important to me because you are worth me giving my time to sharing my life with you. And it totally transformed our kids' ministry. We saw kids couldn't stay away. Parents were telling us, my kids keep dragging me to church. Like parents were telling us, like after they were saved, how did you get here? Oh, my kids dragged me to church. They wanted to be there. And thinking back through my story, that's how it was for me. So grew up in a single mom home. When I was about 16 years old, I started going to church and I had to be there. It was like my new family. We shared our lives together and you couldn't keep me away. I'll tell this story in a future episode. But one of the things that happened is one time I had a car full of my buddies and I was bringing them to church and it was Sunday night. We were running around in town, like hanging out and stuff, sharing our lives. And we were going to be late for church. And a cop pulled me over because I was going 90 miles an hour trying to get to church. Where are you headed, son? I'm like, you're not going to believe this, sir. But honest, it's true. I'm headed to church. And I had to go to traffic school and stuff. But like, you couldn't keep me away. I had to be there. And that's what we saw happening in our ministry. That kids, they could not stay away. They had to be there. Because we were sharing our lives and they knew it was something special and they couldn't wait to be there. And that's the church, a glimpse of the church, because at school, there's discrimination. There's cliques at school. There are bullies and there are mean girls and people are excluded, but not so in the church. In the church, we are all unified. We are on equal standing before Christ. And when we share our lives together, those kids pick up on that. And they say, man, nobody makes fun of me here. We all love each other. we all share our lives together, and it is transformational when it comes to being the church, fellowshipping, sharing your lives. And the way that kids do that is by playing. Another thing that we did, girls, do you remember what we did during COVID when people had to stay home, and not like in the thick of it where like it was like stay home, but for the most part everyone was working from home still. We were still doing a lot of ministry virtual and stuff. Do you guys remember we'd go to people's houses, and what did we do when we do that?
We would drop off prizes, and sometimes we'd bring popsicles and just eat it with families on the porch. So
one thing that and we all know this, that mothers are a little sensitive about is the way their house looks. They don't want visitors over unless their house looks good. Like we were even talking, we're about to have a missionary family over on Monday, and I'm like, hon, what should we do? She's like, do not have them over because our house is not ready, blah, blah, blah. Well, we had a cancellation for a ministry event this weekend, so we're going to spend some time cleaning the house, and then they could come over. So we would always tell moms, we'd call them ahead of time, say, hey, we're going to stop by and bring some prizes for the kids, but don't worry, we're not going to come in. You can just come and sit on the porch, and we'll talk and stuff. And then from that, by the way, what the prizes were for, we were doing online ministry stuff. So preaching was online and that. And if they watched the preaching video and did their memory verse and stuff, they'd get a prize, and we would just deliver it to their house. But out of that came something that we started doing called Popsicles and Prayer. And that was more than just COVID. We would go to somebody's house, we would drop off popsicles, eat popsicles with them on the porch, and then pray with them. So we didn't have to stay long, just long enough to eat a popsicle and to pray with them. And then we'd start dropping off candy in a card. One thing that we did that this is like blow your mind. This is so old school, but we would handwrite letters. Every week I would handwrite 3 letters and send it to 3 families in the church. And of course I would let the parents know, hey, look, your kid's going to get a letter from me in the mail, just so it's not like weird or anything like that. And then it just became normal after that. Kids don't get mail. They get texts, they get emails. They don't get mail. So it's a big deal when a kid gets a letter in the mail. And we started doing that. And boy, I tell you, it just grew everybody closer and closer. And we weren't doing anything that's not already in the Bible. We just found the expression of that for kids. And we're just being the church. So does it blow your mind? Because it sounds weird to say it out loud, but if you are playing Foursquare with your kids, you are being the church. Girls, what do adults do before their adult Bible fellowships? First 20 minutes or whatever.
Drink coffee, talk.
They drink coffee and talk. That's them sharing their lives. Why isn't it okay for kids to share their lives too? So this one thing, the fellowship, absolutely changed the way that we looked at kids ministry in the church. So see, you had a really good point that I think you guys need to hear. It's really good.
They would always have trouble keeping up with their Bible reading, and it would always be for a certain prize. Sometimes we get them a Bible at the end of the year if they did all of their take-home papers. Sometimes we would give them like a cool pen set or something that was like a physical prize that they could hold in
let's
their
give them
hands.
context. So every week you had to read a passage, memorize a verse, and do, like listen to the preaching, whatever. And then we'd offer prizes, if you do it 8 weeks in a row. And we're, like you were saying, we're having problems.
Yeah, it might be like 20% of the kids and all the very like faithful kids with intentional parents, but it just never really caught on. But the one thing that got so many kids on board with it is when we would actually have more fellowship as the incentive. So we would have parties either at our house or at the CMC where we would do a fun theme for the party. We get pizza, we do tacos, we would do video games, and it was just more of the kids sharing their lives. And that's the only thing that really brought in so much interest. So the kids couldn't stay away from that.
That's a good point. And so thank you for reminding me of that. I have adults coming up to me today saying, I remember our parties at your house. If you have kids to your house, that's a big deal. We would play this game called 100 Wacky Things. And it was like, just what it sounds like. You just have these cards and you just got to do these wacky things. And they still remember it, and they're adults now. It is special. If you have your class over to your house, that's special to them. And then what C was saying is we would have those parties like every 6 to 8 weeks if they did their Bible stuff, reading, memory, whatever, up to that point, and they did all of them, they would be invited to this party. And we had these really cool things. Okay, so let's say it was a pizza party this block. A lady in our church made us a big pizza, and there are 8 slices. And every kid who did their work had their name on a pepperoni, and we would move their pepperoni to a different slice. And if they made it all the way around, well, they're invited to the pizza party. And parents couldn't complain because they couldn't say, well, you didn't invite my kid. Oh, yes, we did. Every child is invited, but those who do the work are able to come. We did taco party. I mean, you can find lots of like just dumb decorations on Amazon. And we found like these taco toppers, and I wore a sombrero, and we had fake mustaches for everybody. And we had castanetes, and we had just different things. And then we had tacos. One night we did cereal in pajamas. Well, how simple is that? You remember how the kids used to love to wear their pajamas? Like they just love up to 6th grade. They just wanted to wear their pajamas and come, and we'd eat cereal and we'd play video games. Let's see what else we do. 80s night. We did an 80s party, and that was super fun to decorate for that and to dress up for that and everything. And the kids get totally into it and they dress up for it and all that stuff. Let's see, what else did we do? I can't think of any more off the top of my head.
Ice cream.
We did ice cream party. And each of these, we had one of those posters. So I think like the 80s one, there was like cassette tapes that every kid's name was on, and they like made their way around. The cereal one, there was like different cereal boxes, and then the kids would make their way to different cereal boxes. The ice cream party, like the kids were the toppings or something. There was there was 8 scoops on one huge ice cream sundae, and the kids were like toppings, and they would make their way to the final one. And then, and man, we saw kids doing their work. Their parents would tell me like, oh, they're making sure they're getting their work done. I don't even have to remind them, because they want to be together. And that's so much better than having like a physical prize, like, oh, here's a piece of candy, or here's a thing. But being together, even in their eyes, was more valuable than that. Oh, we did laser tag sometimes. We'd utilize our equipment and stuff. But yeah, that was fantastic. So Maggie, you were saying you remember something from your childhood that you really enjoyed that has to do with sharing our lives together.
So like the Wednesday nights, we would have like every few weeks we'd have a fun night. Like for Halloween, we would do costume night, or for just random times, we had a potato night where we did anything.
And everybody would ask, what is potato night?
It's like open to interpretation.
Yes, it is open to interpretation. It's whatever you want to be. So I wore a Mr. Potato Head shirt. My wife wore a Mrs. Potato Head shirt. We would serve the kids French fries and potato chips. Some kids would bring potatoes that they had like put those eyes on and like hair and like decorate it. And they're like, this is Mr. I don't know, whatever. They would just give them random names. We had mustache night.
We had crazy hair night.
Crazy hair night. Fashion disaster night. We had pajama night. That was a big hit. We had pajama night. That was a big hit. Yeah, just random nights, right? Because those are memorable, and really, you're so excited to be with your friends doing something wacky.
So one of the things that I noticed when I was leading a group Wednesday night was the biggest group for our Wednesday night program of the year was the 3rd grade girls.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The leader of the 3rd grade girls had a big house and a pool in her backyard, and she would consistently have the kids over for parties, for pool parties. She would take them bowling. She would just invite them over and spend more time with them, tea parties. And that group grew and grew because like all like
these like 2 giant rows
all
to
like
themselves.
35 kids or something in that group, because all the girls would be like, oh, you have to come, we have the coolest leader, she wants us over all the time. And they would just they were so tight-knit. They would invite all their friends. It would grow. These kids would hear the gospel. It was so cool to see that.
Because she shared her life with kids. Let's recap. Kids are the church right now. We talk about kids being the future of the church. But kids are the church now. So how do we do kids ministry? We do kids ministry the same way we do church. We continue in the apostles' teaching. We continue in the fellowship. And that's the sharing of lives. And I hope this has been eye-opening to you and motivating to you and help you see how you can implement these things in kids ministry and in your home to transform the way that you look at being the church. If you're a parent and you're listening to this podcast, play with your kids. Play video games with your kids. Play hopscotch with your kids. Play airsoft with your kids. Just play. We're going to do this crazy family day tomorrow where we're going to go to the international market. And we're going to break up into teams of 2, roll a die, and whatever that number lands on, that's what aisle you need to go down to create an international dish. We're going to come back and we're going to cook. Then we're all going to eat it together. What is that but play? And we're sharing our lives together. If you're a kids ministry worker and you're listening to this, if you're a pastor and you're listening to this, can I encourage you? Kids are the church. So share your lives with them and facilitate times for them to share their lives with each other. Thanks for joining us, guys, on this episode of Mr. Forrest Ministries podcast, and we hope to see you guys next time. I'm glad I didn't accidentally hit this one.
I've had to cough for so long.
This is me. When I tell a dad joke, this is my kids.
I don't know. No. It's that one.
I'm negative. It's this one.
This one.
You guys are like DJ.
Our battery died in our audio processor here, like halfway through, and we're just looking at each other like, what are we?
No, you're like the most important thing.
Yeah.
You take away anything
is
from
like,
the podcast.
And we also want to say that we are all crammed into my office. Like, it is packed in here. So to get out, like, C has to get out, walk around. Mag has to get out, walk around. We have to move the lighting around.
And the table.
And the table just to get the door open to get out. So it was kind of an ordeal. This is the greatest cup of all time.
Maybe if you didn't leave so soon.
Well,
Where are my buttons?